Hi students, this is Suchya teaching economics to class 11 and here I am with the 7th chapter of economics and the name of the chapter is employment, growth, informization and other issues. Now this is a very burning issue of the Indian economy, that is employment. There are lots of people looking for employment, educated and uneducated. There are people who are wanting to do a job, but they do not get the job of their choice. Now, all these issues have to be confronted in the chapter. Now, if I say that a country is developed, we cannot say that the point is right, because social justice is delivered only when there is full employment. Because social justice means when every section of the society, when every individual has political, social, economic, all kind of growth, and when there are no finances with the person, when he is not employed, that is the time we cannot say that we are able to provide social justice. And of course, a country cannot be called as a developed country if the majority of the population is unemployed. Therefore, in order to get social justice and in order to term or rate us as a developed nation, we need to have employment. We need to have generation of employment. That is to say, when everybody gets his choice of profession. That is the requirement of the Indian economy. Now, if I am talking of employment, the first thing that I must understand is who is a worker. In a layman's term, a worker is a person who is employed. That is a person who has an employment, who earns money, who is engaged in some kind of productive activity or in some other sector, that is called as a worker. The next is we have to understand that how many kind of employments are there. When I talk of employments, there are people who are self-employed and there are people who are hired. Self-employed will be the kind of a person who works for himself. That doesn't mean he is doing work just for sustaining himself. Self-employed means a person's work is such that he is able to generate income for himself and his family. That is termed as self-employed. He does not need the help, assistance of any other institution. For example, a farmer works on his own land and thus is self-employed. The land is his own. The kind of work that he puts in his fields is his own efforts, and the income that he generates is also his. The second category is of the hired people. The hired are the ones which work in institutions, offices, factories, workshops and so on. They are the people who provide services to somebody. And for example, we can call that a teacher is actually a hired worker as she or he works for an institution. It can also be a proofreader who reads for or does the proofreading for a publication. So, employment generally are of two kind in broad categories, that is self-employed people and the hired people. Now, when we talk of the second category, that is the hired one, they again are subdivided into two, the casual and the regular workers. The casual workers are those workers who are employed just for some time. That is, they are the ones who do not get any kind of benefits, whether the benefits are monetary or otherwise. For example, they are not entitled to provident fund, they are not entitled to any kind of other schemes which we have, and they do not even get regular holidays. Then there are regular employees who are on the payrolls of the company. They are the ones who get all the benefits, that is provident fund, pension, and are also entitled to all kind of holidays. So, the basic difference between a casual worker and a regular worker is that a casual worker is taken very casual by the person who has employed him, and a regular worker is the one who is being looked after by the person who has employed him. Going further into the details, we will try and understand as to what is the workforce. In fact, the actual number of people who are employed is the workforce. Those people who are wanting to get employed are not the real workforce of the country. So, that means the people who are generating income, who are adding to the GDP of the country, are the true workforce of the country. Now, we will talk of the size of the workforce in the country. In fact, it is 70% of the male who include the workforce of the country, and it is 30% of the females who are employed. Whereas, 70% of the people are the size workforce in the rural areas, and it is only the 30% of them in the urban areas. Now, this statistics that 70% are the workforce from the rural areas and 30% are from the urban areas will give you an idea, or rather a misidea, that probably the workforce is more in the rural areas. So, they are the ones who must be adding to the GDP of the country. But that is not the correct situation, not the correct picture, which means clearly that if more people are employed, if the workforce is more, that does not truly depict that the GDP is generated more, because in the rural areas, more number of people of course are employed, but the kind of employment that they have does not necessarily adds to the income. That is, they could be having disguised unemployment. So, which means that there is low productivity in the fields that they are working. For example, on a small piece of land, there are 10 people working, whereas the number or the requirement is merely of 2 people. So, the productivity is very low compared to the workforce which has been employed in the farm. When the productivity is low, that is the time the earning is going to be low. Naturally, 10 people employed, so the share will be divided amongst 10 instead of 2, which means that the earnings will become less, and this will automatically generate poverty in the country, which clearly indicates that it cannot add on to the GDP of the country. For increasing the GDP of the country, we need not necessarily increase the workforce in quantity. You have to increase the quality of the workforce. That is, the people who are employed should be skilled people and should be able to generate more income. Let's talk about the rate of participation of the workforce in India. When we talk of the rate, this is the statistics that is available to us. In the urban areas, it is 34%, in the rural areas, it is 42%, In the urban areas, 52% men and 14% of the women give their participation, whereas in the rural areas it is 53% men and 30% women. The overall participation is 40%. Now, looking at the statistics which is available, we can draw few conclusions. Now, the first one that I can see is that the overall participation is 40%. That means the participation is very, very low. Next thing that I see is that the people or the participation in the urban areas is 34 and in the rural areas it is 42, which means the participation of the workforce in the rural areas is more than that in the urban areas. Now, another figure that has come is that in the urban areas, the 52% men are employed and 14% are women, and in the rural areas it is 53% men and 30% women, which means that the participation of the women in the rural areas is more because maybe they do not have access to education and they start working very early. Now, the women participation or the work of the women is still underestimated in India for various reasons. For example, if the women works at home, then that work, the value of it in monetary sense cannot be termed. But if she works in her family business, then too she is taken as if she has not earned anything monetarily, whereas the men in the family business are considered as active earning members. Let me talk about the occupational structure of employment in the country. When I talk of the occupational structure, the figure that comes from statistics is that the people employed in the primary sector are 57.3%, in the secondary sector 17.6%, in the tertiary sector 25.1%. Now, primary sector is that sector where most of the employment is associated with nature. It could be farming and related things. When I talk of the secondary sector, this means the processing of the primary products, the industries and the factories. The tertiary sector is the service sector. Now, highest is the primary, followed by the tertiary and last in the secondary sector. When a country starts developing, the nature of the occupational structure automatically changes. We see the trend is that less people will be employed in the primary sector and more shall move towards the secondary and the tertiary sector. That's a clear significance that there is development in the country. But sadly in India, there is a very modest change in the occupational structure of the country. Still, most of the people are dependent on primary sector for earning their livelihood, which clearly indicates that the country has not yet developed and there is a long way yet to go and fulfill our dream of calling ourselves a developed nation. When we are able to change these figures, and that is the time that we shall be termed as a developed nation. Now, another problem that we face in the country is called as the problem of casualization. That is the workers employed casually. There are less regular workers and more of casual workforce in the country. Now, casualization has been rising in the country, which is surely not a good sign for the economy of the country. But what are those factors which are leading to casualization? we must understand that since the people are more dependent on primary sector for earning their livelihood, which means that they are more based in the rural areas. When in the rural areas, they slowly realize that it is a kind of disguised unemployment that they are facing. That is, they are not required where they are, their incomes become meager. That is the time they decide of migration. Migration towards the urban areas, towards the towns and the cities. When they start moving, when the migration takes place, we have to understand that all those people who have moved from the rural areas directly from the fields are all unskilled laborers. They do not have any skills as such. Thus, what happens is, since they are unskilled, they are taken very casually. They are given low wages, kept as and when required. That is, the policy of hire and fire is followed by the people who employ them, which is surely not a good sign. But we have to understand, in order to decrease this casualization in the country, we have to first of all have skilled workforce in the country. And since our education is such that it does not provide any kind of skills to the people, it is mere theory, it's mere learning, rote learning. That is why there is so much of casualization. Thus, the migration and the education of the country both have increased casualization. Well, the next is informalization. What is informalization? Informalization is when there is a decline of the workforce in the informal sector. That is the time the informalization starts taking this place. That is to say, there are two kinds of sectors. We have the organized sector and the unorganized sector, about which I talk in detail in the next clipping. We were talking of informalization, and in informalization we have to understand the formal sector and the informal sector. Formal sector is the organized sector of the economy, where more than 10 workers are employed, whereas informal sector is the unorganized sector and less than 10 people are employed. Now, as I said, there is more increase of the workforce in the informal sector. This did not happen just like that. The reasons were that due to the economic reforms which were made in 1991, the country experienced liberalization, globalization and privatization. Now, when there is liberalization, privatization, globalization, that is the time that there will be more informal sectors. There will be more unorganized sectors, because the people have the liberty, they have the choice, they can privately own, and thus this will generate, increase more kind of generation of the unorganized sector. Now, this liberalization, globalization and privatization also led to the market economy in the country instead of the controlled economy that we had before 1991. When there is a market economy, naturally we are going to have more exploitation of the workers, since the main purpose, aim of the people is to generate more and more money. Now, when such a situation occurs, we are definitely having more people employed in the unorganized sector instead of the organized sectors. Now, one topic that I need to discuss is unemployment. Now, who is a person who is unemployed? In real sense, a person who is unemployed is a person willing to work but is not able to get employment. Not able to get a job is called as an unemployed person. There are two visible or two kind of unemployments in the country, that is the rural unemployment and the urban unemployment. When I talk of the rural unemployment, there are two kinds again, the disguised unemployment and the seasonal unemployment. Disguised, as we have been talking again and again, is that kind of unemployment where a person feels that he is employed, he is working, but in fact he is not required where he is working, is the disguised unemployment. The seasonal unemployment is, since the main activity, economic activity in the rural areas is farming, so whenever the crop, there is a harvest, that is the time that these laborers are required. So seasonally they are required, and the time when there is no activity in the farms, they are left unemployed. So the disguised and the seasonal unemployment are the features of the rural unemployment. Then we talk of the urban unemployment. In the urban unemployment, we have the industrial unemployment. Now, industrial unemployment is slowly rising because of the increase in population. Then we have the educated unemployment. Those who have worked hard, those who have studied, those who have skills, those who have degrees, but still are unemployed, who are not getting the kind of job that they must get. Now, what are the reasons for unemployment? The reasons for unemployment are, first of all, the population is increasing at a rapid pace and we are not able to provide employment or jobs to the people at the same pace. There is no, or rather small, investments and savings of the people. Thus, the generation of more jobs becomes very difficult. Then we also fear that if such a kind or such a thing happens in the country, definitely we will not have good economic health for the country. Thus, the factors which are cupulating, which are multiplying the unemployment in the country have to be washed away with. So, whether it is the rural unemployment or the urban unemployment, which could be because the people are illiterate, they are unskilled, they do not have any technical know-how, whatever the reasons are, but when there is unemployment, it definitely leads to poverty in the country, unsatisfaction in the country, not good for the health of the economy of the country. Thus, we have to generate more and more jobs for the people. And that was all about your chapter. Thank you.